go to the rural news now with Maya Burry in Otatahi, Christchurch. Kia ora, good morning to you.
Morena, Guyan.
Now, a carbon footprint of New Zealand shellfish. Researchers have been looking at this. What have they found?
Yeah, so they've found that green shell mussels and Pacific oysters that are farmed here do have among the lowest carbon footprints of all animal proteins and even have a similar footprint to the plant-based product tofu. So this finding is outlined in a new study. It was commissioned by Aquaculture New Zealand and the Ministry for Primary Industries, and it looked at things such as the diesel used on boats, on-farm materials like floats and wood, as well as the electricity used in processing, and then it calculated the total environmental footprint. And Aquaculture New Zealand's policy manager, Steph Hopkins, says mussels and oysters filter their food from the sea, meaning there's not much that needs to be added, so the operations have a low impact.
We have among the lowest carbon footprint of all animal proteins, and we're less than or similar in impact to plant-based proteins like tofu. And so for us, that's really great news, but to be honest, it's not that surprising. We always knew that we were sustainable, but this just reinforces how sustainable we are as an industry. It's a really robust, incredible piece of work that demonstrates how proud we can be of our farmed mussels and shellfish and oysters.
And Steph Hopkins says this work is important. As she says, consumers are paying more attention to the carbon footprint of their food. And this is actually something I've seen at COP26 in Glasgow. On the menu at the conference, there's an estimate of the carbon footprint of each option. So I think the haggis, neeps and tatties, that did have a higher footprint than the venison casserole, but just goes to show it is something people are thinking about.
Yeah, it's going to take longer to order your meal in those situations. Although it's been
Susie Ferguson might have had some thoughts on the haggis, neeps and tatties.
Yeah, that's true. Although 83 days into lockdown up here in Auckland, I'm not. The idea of going to a restaurant was, let alone getting a menu and picking through the carbon footprint.
True.
Now, Vanuatu, they have resumed lime exports to New Zealand. What's going on here?
Yeah, and this is expected to be good for orchardists there. There was years of talks and planning involving the Vanuatu government and the New Zealand Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade to set up an export program, and that was trialled last year, but was short-lived due to compliance issues. And John Stokes from the produce company, which facilitated this export deal, says that biosecurity procedures, they have been strengthened, and that's allowed shipments to get back on track this month. And Mr Stokes says Vanuatu has always supplied seasonal workers to New Zealand under the RSE scheme, which he says is a big help to Kiwi orchardists. So he says it's good to support the Pacific's own agriculture industry as well.
You know, on one hand, this is a great future pathway for these wonderful people who are coming over and helping our industry picking, and then they go back and they have the ability to be able to establish horticultural businesses in their own country. So that's one thing that's really good for a payback. Another thing is obviously if we think about food miles, we're getting product out of the Pacific rather than product that's coming from the US.
And prices for limes do tend to skyrocket during the off-season here, which is between August and February. Last year, they reached a whopping $88 per kilogram. Not sure who's buying limes when they're that high. And John Stokes says this is a time when produce levels in Vanuatu are high and growers struggle to make the most of their crops. So it's seen as a bit of a win-win. But that wraps up the rural news for this morning, and I'll be back during Midday Report.
Thanks, Maya Burry, there with the rural news.